In Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 15, the author gives us this verse that I want to read. And for context, let me give you the verse in front of it too. Verse 14. Make every effort to live in peace with everyone and to be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one falls short of the grace of God, and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many. Have you ever felt like you just don't feel right? Like maybe things aren't going just the way you wish, or maybe the circumstances aren't the way you wish, and you have tried very hard to feel better about the person, about the situation, about whatever it may be. So I've been reading this book, How to Have a Better Relationship with Anybody, and it's a great challenge for us because the author starts out by causing us to question ourselves whether or not there's bitterness within us, whether or not something that we have experienced or something that we've been through has led us to keep bitterness within us. And so it's interesting because the author of Hebrews says we should make every effort to live in peace. And then one of the behaviors that goes along with this, making every effort to live in peace, is to ensure that no bitter root grows up. And bitter root is a picture of something that just begins to take shape and just begins to form, and then it gets some nourishment, and it gets some nutrition, and it gets some attention, and it just begins to build up within it. Maybe it's unnoticed at first, maybe it's not really acknowledged at first, but over a period of time, it creates something. And so there's this call to us to pay attention to what is happening within us, what is happening inside of us, and how it may change over time, and how that may affect the way that we respond to others, the way that we treat others, even the way we view ourselves, and the way we view ourselves in our relationship to God. And so he gives us a couple of things that I think are really encouraging and challenging for us to consider when it comes to how bitterness can take root within us, how it can kind of begin to pop up, if you will, in our lives. And one of the first things he points out is that we have a desire within us. It's a need within us. It's given to us by God, so it's a good thing. And it's a need to be loved unconditionally, to be cared for, to be cherished, to be valued. And so many times in our life, the people around us, intentionally or unintentionally, will let us down in that regard. And because of that, we will feel like we're not being unconditionally loved. And there's within us a desire to be loved in this way. And so that can cause us to allow this bitterness, this, I'm just not quite getting what I want out of life or my circumstances. And it allow that to take root within us and begin to overtake us, if you will. And so that certainly can be one of the ways that happens. He says this: if a person registers a negative message, they feel cheated and deeply wounded inside. Seeds of anger may then germinate, which, if nourished by further evidence of unmet needs, can grow into a root of bitterness. Now, I don't know about you all, but it doesn't take a lot of work on my part to come up with a list of what I would consider unmet needs. Most of those would be very unrealistic. Many of them would be very selfish in nature, but I can still come up with them. And so I'm sure can most of you all as well. So the next thing we want to see is that bitterness can come from personal loss. Personal loss, that we just don't get something that we thought we should get. It might be a personal thing. It might be health. It might be a loss of a job. It might be a situation that we had no control over. But personal loss can lead to a feeling of bitterness that we're being cheated out of something that could have happened. It can also come from a willingness to just invest ourselves in our own selves and to put ourselves first and to live a selfish and a lust-centered life that makes jealousy and pride and anger at the forefront of our lives. And so when that feels like it's not getting us what we want, and it won't, even though it may temporarily do so, it may lead to bitterness. And so he writes this, that some people may eventually reach the point where the more time and energy they invest in achievements, the less in proportion they receive in terms of meaning. And that can lead to bitterness as well. And it's just a reminder for us that the God that we serve is a good Father, a loving Father, a kind and generous Father, and He desires to give good gifts to us. And so we need to understand that that is who He is for us as well. Another verse I would give you is one that, if you've been with us on Sundays, you know we've been looking through the book of Job and studying through the book of Job. But this is what Job has to say in relation to bitterness. He says, I loathe my very life Therefore, I will give free rein to my complaint and speak out in the bitterness of my soul. So this happened in Job's life after he had a loss of his family, he had a loss of his wealth, and he had a loss of his health as well. And so it led him to this nothing is right, nothing can be right scenario in the way that he lived and existed. So we have these three things: this idea that we're not being unconditionally loved and our needs aren't being met. We have this period of loss where maybe we have experienced great loss. Maybe we just have experienced these little small losses, but they've accumulated in a way that they're affecting us. And then maybe we take on a wrong view of God, and we see God as a harmful father, not a loving father, and we begin to become bitter about the circumstances and situation of our life. And so just to kind of wrap up with why that can be so dangerous, and in the next opportunity we'll talk about how we can deal with bitterness. But for today, let me just close with this. Bitterness eventually focuses and puts all its attention on vengeance. If you've ever had a sibling, you understand what vengeance is. You understand what it means to think and to prepare and to allow your mind to dwell on what could happen if you could get what you wanted and could get your way. And so that is one of the greatest harmful side effects of bitterness, is it will lead you into this perpetual war against others. So often it's waged just within us and we don't even realize it. And it'll destroy us and corrode us from within. And so the encouragement from that is, if you feel like that might be an issue, is to go to 1 John chapter 1 and verse 9, which says, if we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us. If we're thinking about how we wish things would not go well for others, and then we confess that as a sin, God will begin to work with us there. And so in our next opportunity, we'll look at ways that we can combat bitterness in our lives and rid ourselves of this tendency towards bitterness. God bless you, and I'll see you very soon.